Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, July 23rd. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. Chris Holtmann's Ohio State basketball program just got a big boom yesterday. Malaki Branham, a top 30 player in the class of 2021, just committed to Ohio State. He's the highest ranked player Chris Holtmann has signed since he's been at Ohio State. Buckeye Scoop's Mick Walker has been talking to Malaki for quite a while now as he was finalizing this decision. Mick, what was it that convinced him that Ohio State was the place for him?
Yeah, so the big thing with him is he's originally from Ohio, originally from Columbus, lived in the Linden area. His mom still is there with his two younger siblings. And I think the fact that his two younger siblings are still there and his mom is there played a role in him coming to Ohio State. But also, they put in a ton of work and didn't just treat him as an in-state kid that would be a lock at Ohio State. They put in a ton of work to be sort of the program and distinguish themselves. And they made it known to him that they're going to go all in on him. And if for some reason they were to miss him, then they were going to move on to targets. They weren't sort of playing the field, keeping guys cool until they heard a word from Malaki. He was their number one guy on the board. They were going to go all out on him until he said stop. Luckily, that's not what he said. He said, I'm coming. And really just that being around his family, getting to come to a place that's close to him and also represent his home state and also have the chance to play early at a program like Ohio State. It's going to be losing 4 or 5 seniors and just different players by the time he steps on campus was a huge opportunity for him, seeing as he could probably be the leading scorer, if not one of the leading scorers for Ohio State by the time he hits campus.
Yeah, he is still a year away. He's a 2021. He will not be there this fall. But when he does step on campus, what kind of player is Chris Holtmann getting?
Yeah, so Malaki he's as I've joked about with you, I believe before. I always mess with him. Our inside joke is that he's not a shooter, even though he's listed as one of the country's top shooting guards. His 3-point shot is something he's coming along on, but really his game is predicated on getting the ball, getting to the basket, using screens, getting downhill, and finishing at the rim, which is why he plays great with a guy like Meetcha Johnson. He's going to be able to get the ball from Meetcha, play off of Meetcha, and get to the rim and score points. But Meetcha can also knock down the outside shots. So the kick's there for Malaki. Malaki is also going to play great with a guy like Kalee Etzel, who's going to come up, set screens, and meet Malaki and kick back for pick and pops or go to the rim, and Kalee can come and get a rebound. Malachi's game is predicated on getting downhill, and his defensive end and his three-point shooting shot are obviously good because he's a top 30 player in the country, but they're coming along to sort of fit where his athleticism and slashing ability is.
Now, the Buckeyes have commitments from the top 3 players in the state for 2021. They are all top 100 players. You just mentioned all 3 of them: Malaki Branham, Meetcha Johnson, Kalee Etzel. And, I think if people just follow football recruiting, the normal assumption is, oh, yeah, well, an Ohio kid, of course they're going to come to Ohio State if Ohio State wants them. Ohio State has not signed an Ohio player since Justin Ahrens, which was like 3 years ago. So this is not always automatic that OSU gets the top kids in Ohio in basketball the way it is in football. What was it that made it happen this year with the 3 guys for 2021?
Yeah, so Ohio State, it's part obviously if there's a top guy. 2 years ago, Rocket Watts was moved into Spire Academy in Ohio and went to Michigan State, but he's originally from the Michigan area. He was the top guy in Ohio. He was never going to come to Ohio State. Last year, the top guy was John Hughley, who signed with Pittsburgh. That was a decision that Ohio State made at some point to choose Zedke, who they signed, over John, and that's something that both parties agreed upon, and they went along, and everything's fine nowadays with John. John's happy at Pittsburgh. Ohio State's happy with Zed. So the working Ohio and recruiting, it goes both ways. It's if Ohio State chooses to move on it, or if they can also land the guy. So, but what put these 3 guys together is that, Kalen, his uncle grew up playing at, when he was growing up, his uncle was playing at Ohio State or had played at Ohio State. So that family connection's always been there. Like we said, Malaki grew up in the Columbus area. He's always seen it, always heard about it. And he's just, him and Meetcha don't necessarily have those direct ties to Ohio State like Kalen does with his uncle, but they're both guys that just come up in Ohio and love being in Ohio State, and they love the thought of that. And also they fit into that caliber of talent to play at Ohio State, which Ohio hasn't always had in these past few classes.
Now, I think since the last time we talked to you, you have seen both Meetcha Johnson and Kalee Etzel in person. You covered an AAU tournament in Indianapolis, I think.
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Fort Wayne, Indiana. Yeah. So what did you see out of those guys? How are their games coming along I'm sure it's good for them to just be back on the court and playing again as in sort of an unusual year, but what did you see out of those guys and in terms of their on-court development as they get ready for Ohio State in a year?
Yeah, if we go back and look at Meetcha before he got injured and during his sophomore year when they first started ranking this 2021 class, he was a top 60, top 70 player. This is a guy that when national guys get to see him, the ranking councils at different other sites get to see him. This is a guy that could be a top 50 player. I think his ceiling's maybe in that top 30 range with Malaki, but I think he's a top 50 player when everything's healthy and everything's going for him. Because he's no longer a 5'11", 55-pound point guard that he was at Garfield when he started his high school career. He's now 6'3", 185, 190-pound kid that is solidly built. And that's something he's worked on. He's added a ton of athleticism with that size, but also he's worked on refining his shot and making sure it becomes more consistent, but also being a more intelligent, older player when it comes to playing the game. He's a much better passer. He controls the pace more, and he's giving a lot more intensity on defense, which is something that I think if you asked Ohio State coaches and probably people that observed Meetcha, or something they would have asked him to do more of before he got injured. And now he's sort of putting it all together, and I think that's why you're looking at. I mean, Malachi's going to end up a top 30 player, maybe even higher. Meetcha's going to end up a top 50 player, and going to Kalee, I think he's solidly in the top 100 now. And I think the biggest thing with him is proving that right now he's right in that spot between a 3 and a 4 when it comes to playing as a small forward, power forward. Right now, the thing with him is just adding size and adding mass. That way, he can be a 4, which is what the plan is for him to be on Ohio State, be a 4 and work in the post, guard guys in the post. That's what the hope and goal is for him on Ohio State, and that's what he wants to do. I think so long as he does that and proves that he can be a 4 and not a tweener between the 3 and 4, he's definitely going to be able to play at Ohio State. He's probably going to take a year or two, but he's definitely going to be a player at Ohio State that has a ton of upside. And he's another guy that I think is probably top 70 when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, bringing in a top 30 guy like Branham, I mean, if Meetcha Johnson does end up a top 50 guy and Kalee Etzel ends up, say, top 75, I mean, this is potentially a program-changing class for Chris Holtmann, because it seems like his trajectory has been very strange over the first few years, where the first year kind of wildly exceeded expectations, and then everyone thought, oh, now he's going to take the next step. And then for various reasons, they've been good and they've exceeded expectations on a year-to-year basis, but they have not been back at that, top 2 in the Big Ten kind of level yet. This seems like a class that, depending on how things pan out, could be one that really lets this team take the next step.
Yeah, we talked about this prior before we turned on the mic, and that in his second year, Ohio State signed his second full class of Ohio State signed his class with Greg Oden, Mike Conley, David Letty, those kind of guys. If all these guys move up like we just talked about, this is a class that could end up in that same vein. They're chasing guys like Efton Reed, Charles Bediako, and I think they truthfully have a better chance with guys like Efton than people give him credit for. This is a guy. I mean, with Malaki now in the class, you got top 100 players constantly recruiting Efton. This is a class that can be very talented, and it's something that Ohio State hasn't seen since those earlier Thad Matta years, and definitely hasn't probably seen in the past 5 to 10 years. This could lead them to possibly a Big Ten championship, and Malaki is the sort of talent that I know has been talked about on our board often, that if he puts it all together, he's a guy that could be the difference between getting into the tournament and making a Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four type of run. He's a future pro. Efton is a guy that if they were to land, he's a future pro. Those are the guys that take them from being good to being a great, recognizable program. Luckily, Ohio State, when Chris Holtmann came here, he had guys like Jay Sean Tate and Katie Bates-Diop. He had a long-term old program like he wants. Now he's working on building that, and now once you build that, you have to get these younger, talented guys that can come in and be impacts, end up being pros, and that's what he's looking to do with this class.
No, I think people may be wondering, technically Ohio State is now full for 2021, but you're talking about potentially landing another player. Where are they? What's the thinking on how many guys they could potentially take for 2021?
Yeah, right now they have 3, and I think they love their 3. And the goal is with typical roster attrition, you never know. I think the plan would be to sort of go for a 4th guy. When we first launched the site, within the first few weeks, I wrote a piece on the top 5 big men Ohio State's offered in this 2021 class, and those 5 names are coming back up: Chet Holmgren, Charles Bediako, Efton Reed, Frank Keping, and Mackie Tien. Those 5 guys are 5 guys that they're going to recruit till the end and chase. And if they land one of those guys, they'll take and be happy with the class. And if not, then you move on to a transfer and you try and get guys in 2022 like a Sean Phillips, who's a top 50, top 75 player in Ohio. I mean, in the country, that is from Ohio and is now moving up to the Ipsy Prep with Imani Bates.
Now, just to take a quick peek ahead to 2022, Ohio State has Bowen Hardman, who's a shooting guard already committed. Who are the top targets remaining on their board for 2022? What other names should people at least kind of have in mind?
Yeah, so we the name that's going to come up when you first talk about targets is Chris Livingston. The thought process has been with him for a long time that the plan is to go pro as early and as humanly possible with him. I do think maybe if Ohio State was to sit there and continue recruiting him, and the word comes out that he can't go pro immediately, maybe Ohio State gets a look. It's a similar case to I just mentioned the name Imani Bates, and he's committed to Michigan State right now, and that's something that happened because when you look at the contact period that started for 2022 in June, Michigan State was the only school that called Imani Bates the number one player in the country and somebody that people would say is the best prospect to come out in many years. I think Ohio State is still on Chris, and that's something that could pay dividends in the end. But moving on outside of Chris, I mean, Ohio guys, you look at Josiah Harris out of Richmond Heights, that's somebody they really love, and they're hoping to maybe get on campus, see a little more live before they make their all-out push and try and land that commitment. I mentioned Sean Phillips in the earlier segment. He's another guy from Ohio that they really like. And then it goes down to there's different Ty Rogers out of Michigan and Grant Blanc. He's a guy they like, but right now they're sort of still in that feeling out period when it comes to 2022. I think this is a time with the whole coronavirus. Obviously, it affects these 2021 kids a lot for not getting able to visit. But in the long run, we might see it affecting these 2022 guys because they won't be able to get in front of the eyes of coaches between their sophomore and junior year, which is typically the biggest recruiting season across all sports.
Well, Mick, thank you for making the time to join us this morning. You can please take like half a day off. You've been pretty busy covering this story and a bunch of others the last few weeks. Go ahead and take like an hour or two off before you jump back on the road to go find someone else. You can find Mick's reporting on Malaki Branham as well as literally dozens of other top football and basketball prospects at Buckeye Scoop. Strongly recommend you check that out. He's been on the road quite a bit and putting in the work, and you will see the results at buckeyescoop.com. Also, please check out all of our great podcasts. They're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. You can just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there, and they will be delivered right to your phone as soon as we post a new episode. Also, please leave us a rating and review. That helps new listeners find those shows. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day, and we will talk to you tomorrow.